In order to access the form settings, we will unlock the menu with an administrator code. Staff codes or staff or artist roles won't have access to settings, but administrator or shop manager account, or the account manager rather, will. So we go to settings and then form editor, and in the form editor you can completely customize your form in this text entry here. There's some text controls here. You can underline, make things bold, italics. The easiest thing to do, though, is to copy and paste. If you have something in, say, a Word document or Google Doc or something like that, or even a PDF, you can just make the selection, copy, and then paste it here. Here are the acknowledgments that I mentioned earlier. You can. Every jurisdiction is going to have slightly different rules about what your form is required to include. I agree that I have read it all. And they may have to acknowledge that separately from just the signature. You can also add a second acknowledgement here. I agree again, or anything that you might require there. Once you've got all that set up, you can save. And we have, by default, we have tattoo forms in both English and Spanish. I'll show you how to enable or disable the secondary languages. And we also have piercing forms. And we also have piercing forms in English and Spanish. Now, we can customize the questionnaire that you see on the client intake form here. We can add new items to the allergy section. So we can just add a new item and say new allergy, whatever that might be. And that shows up there. We can always remove it by hitting the X. Sure you want to delete it? Yes. And then under health conditions, same thing, new item. So we may need to add, say, hemophilia. Under health conditions, that may not be in there. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, now we've got hemophilia. So we can save the save the questionnaire now. Our customized questionnaire has been saved, and that'll show up on all of our client intake forms. And the third tab here under the form editor is preferences, and this controls a lot of different things, but essentially it's your workflow on how you want to work and how you want to manage client intakes. So we can enable or disable client services. For example, if you don't do piercings, you can just uncheck that, save, and then when you go to create a new client form, head over there real quick, you'll see that piercings are no longer here in the list, and the only option is tattoos. We'll discard this form and then head back to the settings. Back under form editor and then preferences. Custom forms we didn't quite touch on, but let's go back there. So we do have custom forms. So for example, if you offer services other than tattoo or piercing, you can enable custom forms, and those are created under the form editor. And all you need to do is next to tattoo and piercing here, all you need to do is hit the little plus sign, and then you can add a new form. And let's say you offer laser removal. You can add that, hit the little checkbox, and then you've got a laser removal form. And you can also add additional languages for that as well. But you would enter or paste the form content here, save it, and now we have a laser removal form. The custom forms can be removed, so you can remove that there. And that's now enabled. Something else you may want to do is under in the settings under services, we may want to add a new service, right? So now that we have a laser form, if you're going to be using our checkout system, you can add this as a service with a cost associated. So we can add a new service. It is currently offered. We'll call it removal, and we can select the form that is associated with that. And then we can select the category. So we maybe put that under tattoo categories, under the tattoo category. And a default price. It doesn't have you don't need to put a default price in. It just helps out with the checkout to just have something in place, and maybe that's an hourly of, I don't know, $2.50 an hour. Is it taxable or not? You can check that sales tax box, and then save, and then you'll have a new service which is linked to the form. You can also add products, but that's another tutorial altogether. Categories here, we have some default categories built in, but you can add more categories there as well. I'm going to go back to the form editor for a moment and then explain some of the other preferences. So on the client information form, we have some options. I mentioned earlier that we do have the ability to enable minors with parents. If you do work on minors, just make sure that's enabled, and then you will see the parent information become a requirement on the form. Emergency contact, some places require it, others just want it as a nice to have, so you can enable that, and that'll show up on the form. The country form field we have disabled by default, but if you live near a border and you have, or in a big tourist area, you may have people from outside of the country getting work done at your shop. You may want to enable that, the country field form. But for most, having that disabled is probably the way to go. Multiple languages, you can enable multiple languages here, and I showed you how to create those in the form editor, but I'll show you where that appears on the client side. So if you head back to the main page, you'll see here you've got your client selection, or your language selection rather, on the client page. And you'll notice each time we head back to that home page, the menu gets locked again, so you just have to unlock with the studio pin. That's for security. Back into the form editor. So let's talk about the last section here, the workflow section. The ID first workflow is what we saw on the client form. So we'll just briefly review these. I'll show you the form again, and then we'll come back and make some changes. So we've got ID first, which essentially asks the client for their identification before they fill out the form. If you disable that, you can let the clients fill out their form on, say, an unattended kiosk, maybe a computer or tablet of some sort at the front counter, and then you could check their ID at the end of their paperwork before the work is done, obviously. And the skip the queue is a workflow enhancement that allows you to go straight through from the client intake form straight through to the checkout. It is enabled by default, but if you have a busy shop and you do have clients completing their forms on unattended devices, then you may want to uncheck skip the queue. That way their forms get put into the queue and are ready for their ID to be checked by a staff member. So I want to save these settings, and then we'll go back into the client form and show you those workflows. So I'll start a new client, and you'll see that unlike before, we don't have the camera at the top of the page. So this is the result of disabling the ID first workflow. Now this is maybe what you would see, what would be present to a client that was coming in and just filling out their own form on a countertop device or a lobby device that's set up in sort of a kiosk fashion. So they can fill out all their information here. I'm going to just, for the sake of time, I'm going to just look up a return client so that I don't have to type everything. pick one of my test clients here. We've got John Test. I'll try this guy, Test Smith. There we go. Now you see there's no ID showing at the top, even though he's a return client. But I'll show you where that is in just a moment. So he picks his service, and now that we've got emergency contact enabled in our preferences, you'll see that there's emergency contact here. And then we can just put the phone number in. They can check and make sure all of their information is up to date and correct. Continue. They can agree to all the terms that we set, and then they can sign. And then when they're done signing, this is a little different than the first time I showed you this. So this is what the client would see, and they would just hit OK, and then they would be taken back to the main home page, which is now reset and waiting for another client. So once that client's done filling out their form, they would maybe approach the counter and say you had a front desk computer that the staff works with, or maybe it's another tablet. They would be able to open it up on their device, or even on the same device. It's pretty flexible. You can work in any way with this, depending on how you have those settings configured. But in the queue here, this is where that customer would be waiting for an ID check. You can hit that form icon, check all the info. This is their previous ID that was loaded in from a previous session. You'd fill out all the shop information here. Notes, you can potentially add some notes after the session as well. You can stash it back in the queue and then come back and save it later after the session is complete. And after you do the checkout, this item will be removed from the queue. But we'll do another video on the queue all on its own. So let's head back into settings and preferences, and that's how you enable all that. So let's see. Yeah, that's all your settings. And that's how you configure your forms. And that's how you set up your forms.